Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Randy Perkins and this presentation is all about using SharePoint in government organisations, legal departments and legal organisations. It will also apply to other organisations, so if you're not a legal department, it doesn't matter. It's generally my experience within those types of organisations. If you're on Twitter, you can use the hashtag, follow me if you like as well. Just a warning, these are all my own words. It's nothing to do with companies I currently work with or viewpoints of companies I've worked with or work with now and so on. So the agenda is going to be a bit about me, using SharePoint in government organisations, pros, cons, issues I found. Then in the legal sector as well. Try a bit of a demo if you've got internet access. A bit about SharePoint in the cloud, Office 365 and legal documents, and then any questions. So who am I? I'm Randy Perkins. I'm an independent consultant with my own company. My contact details are there, so if you have any questions or want to follow up later, feel free to contact me. I've worked with SharePoint since 2002, mainly around content management, information management, mainly using web-based content management systems, so from bespoke systems to things like Rhythmix, which is XML-based, and various other types as well. I deal with sometimes user adoption, accessibility, usability, so I've touched on making accessible content management systems in the past for charities and for types of organisations. I got there through various roles. Started off as just an internet developer and editor, and worked my way around to SharePoint consultancy. As I said, I've worked with lots of different types of organisations, so I know if an organisation is trying to cut costs or save money, like the British Heart Foundation, how to do it. If you've got lots of money, like people like Sky, Accenture, yes, they have lots of money to spend, but they still want it done as cheaply as possible. It's my own company. Also run the SharePoint user group in East Anglia with a friend of mine, Peter. So if you haven't been before, whether join a London one, there's ones in Manchester. The URL is there, so feel free to come along. All the sessions are free, so there's no charge there. It's going to be an interactive session, so feel free to ask questions, and I've got some questions for you. So who here has been using SharePoint since 2001? So we've got some people. 2003, 2007, 2010, 2013, the first one? One or two? Cool, okay. And anybody still using 2001 or 2003? Okay, 2001? In parts. Okay, so no support issues there. Okay. Anybody planning to upgrade to 2013 soon? Okay, so quite a lot of you. So there'll be a few tips in here about that. They're just general upgrade tips, so hopefully they'll be useful. Now, SharePoint's been used in legal organisations mostly since 2001, but not a great deal. If we see SharePoint developed over the years from 2001 and onwards, what's happened is you've seen people like FTSE companies use SharePoint quite extensively, and then other organisations, legal organisations, have adopted it, moving away from their traditional systems. So to chat a bit about SharePoint in the government. So I worked for a government organisation a few years ago, national organisation working with external people or other organisations, both commercial and internal public sector as well. They had a challenge. They were creating about 125 gigabytes worth of data per week, which equates about 6 terabytes per year. So what they were planning to do is create a new farm, have all existing content in its current environment, and with new content moved onto this new system. So there's a number of challenges there. It was originally based on SharePoint 2007, and no plans to upgrade to 2010, even though 2010 was out because of licensing and training and so on. They dealt with multiple cases, thousands of cases every year, as I said, using lots of data. So the issues there, specifically around databases, was how to manage those databases. Should you pre-provision them, pre-grow them? So initially, what they were trying to do is they had multiple cases, so people would contribute to those cases with various documents. They could be PDFs, Word documents, TIFF files, high-resolution images of medical X-rays, and so on. And the cases they were working on could last a day to 21 years. So although the cases which were 21 years were very unlikely to occur that often, they had to have a system which they were only thinking about right now or 2 or 3 years' time, but in 21 years' time, how would they gain access to the data and how would they manage that? So the solution was to create multiple databases straight away to store the information, pre-grow them so they're all ready to use. And there's multiple reasons for doing that. You're spreading the load across multiple databases as site collections get created. Also allows you to know exactly because you've planned what you're going to have in the future, you'll not have issues of running out of disk space. Whereas I was in a session yesterday where about 20% of the audience was saying they've had issues of running out of disk space. Has anybody had those here? Yeah. So you shouldn't have to do that. Your architect should architect a system as best as possible so it's mostly suitable for 6 months, 12 months down the line. You should have SCOM in place to monitor SharePoint, or there's tools within SharePoint you can use as well to see how much data is being added to SharePoint, being used and consumed. The solution had some custom development, just a little bit, which was similar to Lightning Tools Webpart, where it rolled up content information from multiple site collections and presented it to users. So they had to also think about when they were going to be archiving content, what would happen to those documents and the roll-up, how would they gather all that information together and use it. The project's ongoing simply because they came up with a solution. Somebody came in and decided that was the wrong way of doing it, changed it, but then that person left, and then somebody changed it back to the original solution. So what they're doing now is going back to the second solution and re-architecting it. So it's important to test your theories out when you're architecting systems and developing systems, because you don't want to do a lot of rework. It can cause a lot of time delays. Now, SharePoint is, as I said before, it's been used by legal departments and the legal industry, but it's fairly new to them. It's a quote from Microsoft, an article I found a few months ago. Basically, Microsoft are now committed to developing low-cost solutions for legal departments and organisations. It's quite a big shift from where they were previously. They're not known for being, say, if you like, traditional document management house, and there's still some way to go, but they are getting there. And with everything, Microsoft tend to go in to provide a cheap or relatively cheap solution and build on top of that over the years. SharePoint's used roughly by 80% of the FTSE 500 or 100, I think is, organisations. And as I said before, that's changed over the years. Obviously, 2001, not many people were using it. As it's developed, more and more people using it. But this is in contrast to legal firms, where it's more like 47%, half of the organisations are using it. And that's kind of obvious. Traditionally, legal firms don't upgrade their technology that fast, similar to governments. They are the legal people who bring in the money, bring in the clients, are very much concerned with, getting to know the system they have, working with it, not having many changes, because their time is money and they're a very expensive industry. The legal world have been using SharePoint mainly for intranets. It's very much brochureware, not so much document management. Then you sometimes find SharePoint being used for extranets as well. Thirdly, when they do use it for document management, it's usually very lightweight. It's for HR, finance, parts of the business. Sometimes you see fast in there as well. Usually that's, historically before it was with SharePoint 2010 or Microsoft purchased it. So we're seeing a gradual move to organisations still using fast, but moving to the SharePoint version. So with 2010, you could still have a separate farm, didn't have to be with SharePoint, but now with 2013, it's all baked in together. few organisations using it for web content management in the legal sector. Don't know any off hand. I have heard of some, but not too many. Again, that's because of the maturity. If we look at Norton Rose, who I've worked for previously, they had quite a clear strategy on SharePoint and thought about it very carefully before implementing it. So they thought that SharePoint was a key way they could use it as a tool to communicate. We've heard about how SharePoint can be used for social aspects, very much brochureware, so communication like Norton Rose. They use it as a platform, so they're not going to social all out using YAML or anything like that, but they're building on top of what they have at the moment. They also use it as a knowledge management platform, so trying to get the key information out of key people in the business, lawyers, IT, HR, and sharing that information. Also, they're using it to bring their clients closer to the firm. So how law firms work, you usually have partners in law firms and they can sometimes keep their clients. So law firms like to try and bring or keep their clients for their own business, not give them off to competitors and so forth. CPA Global, another law firm who specialise in intellectual property, mainly use SharePoint again, similar to Norton Rose, as a collaboration platform. They, a few years ago, created an extranet, going from their legacy system, basic content management system for their website. They just extended that, and then somebody decided in marketing, well, let's get rid of our web-based system and upgrade it, but never thought about the extranet. So they used SharePoint as a platform where they could quickly deploy that, implement it, maintain security quite easily and effectively for those users. Now that needed some customization because out of the box, SharePoint's not really an extranet tool. You've got to manage those users, password management and things like that. But it was better than the previous solution they had. One of the main things that CPA use SharePoint for is an application they built. It's called CPA Global Discovery, and it's basically a patient research application. So what it is it allows users to search across a wide range of resources to look for information related to patent applications and so on. So this is actually an application that they've built on top of SharePoint. This SharePoint platform does nothing else. It's only for this tool. It's a fairly large farm. It was built on SharePoint 2007 with Fast alongside it as well. And the key point of it was to save money. I think it's about 24 servers, excluding SQL Server backend. So this was a heavy investment for CPA. And the main reason behind it was to save money. Their current tool was slowing down. They wanted to have a competitive edge against the opposition, so they decided on the SharePoint platform. As I said, it was a large farm, but what is a large farm? Does anybody know what this is? Hoover Dam, yeah. Who said that? Okay, great. So it's Hoover Dam in America, between Nevada and Arizona, I think it is, and it's one of the largest dams, or was the largest dam in the world when it was built. But that's changed. So people's viewpoint of what a large farm has also changed. We hear CPA Global have 24 servers. Yes, it's a large farm when it was built, but depending on the type of organisation, it may be a small farm. But most organisations tend to have multiple large farms and doing it like, say, 50, 60 server farm. So traditionally, Microsoft say small farm is 1 to 2 servers, medium farm going on to 3-tier environment, and then a large farm having farm services or service farms, if you like, being consumed. So Clifford Chance, another legal firm, it's one of the largest legal firms in the industry, and they wanted a new document management system to replace the existing legacy system. So they are based around 25 countries, about 35, 40 offices, 3,000 odd legal advisors. So a large system. So Their current environment was, I think, OpenText Hummingbird, DM5 environment, had a fat client, it's file-based and SQL-based. So what I think the system did was take a document, add metadata to it, store it as a unique file name in the system, and then just present it to users with the correct file name when they were loading it. The problem with this was it was expensive. They also had a custom-built internal application called File As You Go for managing their email content. Again, a very expensive tool. So they needed to change, and the main reason for change was to have one platform, or try to go to at least one platform. The other reasons for change were focusing on their core business. They're not a legal firm. It shouldn't be creating applications to the extent, depending on what their business is, about file system managing emails and such. They wanted to reduce costs and standardise the platform and become more agile as well. So the solution was based around SharePoint 2010. They worked with Microsoft to come to this conclusion. They went out to tender, spoke to various organisations, also looking at upgrading the current platform. But 2010 was the chosen platform, along with integrating fast, and they had a off-the-shelf solution called Wall Builder, which they already had, and that basically looks after security and management of that security. What they also had was something called the DMA, or Document Management Accelerator. Now, this was a custom tool that simply was developed by Microsoft, so it was a solution that Microsoft can provide to any organisation who wants to buy it. But it was a tool specifically around organisations who wanted to manage content, specifically around legal documents, and I suppose take that next step from what the current platforms can do. So it didn't have that many legal specific features, but in the legal world they would say it had, a lawyer would say they want ease of access, like many people, easy access to sites they're working on. Relevant search results, with the previous system, the results they were getting weren't that great when they were doing searches. They want to be able to save directly to a matter site. Now, a matter site is basically a site collection for a matter, and a matter is like a project or case they're working on for a client. They wanted it easy to have a document owner. So we're not talking about somebody who created the document or somebody who's edited or documented recently. We're talking about somebody who owns that document. So they were customizing SharePoint, having content types to identify who was actually owned the document. So an owner may not actually open the document, they may not edit it, they may not have even created it, but they actually do physically own the document. They wanted an easy way to compare versions as well, and create comparisons. So when they're sending off legal documents to clients, they're able to easily pull those documents together, show them the previous versions, the current version, and the amendments going on in that document. They also wanted to be able to copy documents between site collections as well. So does anybody here often need to copy documents between site collections? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you do with the metadata? How do you copy that? Right. Okay. So you copy a document and you have to copy the metadata. It's all time consuming. So this is, Clifford Chance didn't want this. They wanted to go to the ribbon and say, select the documents, copy documents. So a lot of this was based around customization, and from what users' point of view, and what I can show you legally, was around the common file dialog box. So what you see here is something really similar to what you have if you do file open in Word, and you get a list of documents. But the customizations are around the tabs at the top, My Recent Documents, Recent Sites, and Search. So if they're in a Office application, Word, Excel, and so on, they're able to go File Open, straight from the dialog box. They can see their recent documents, they can see recent sites as well, and they can do a search straight from the dialog box. So we mentioned security previously about matters. So they had, for every matter they created, they had one site collection. So that seems a bit much, but when you think about security and Chinese walls and things like that in this type of industry, it's a quite common requirement. And to do that, they use Wall Builder, like I said, which is an in-app application. So we already said they had a lot of data. They've got about 3 terabytes in their environment at the moment. So what type of documents are you guys storing? I mean, most of you mostly would be able to identify that you might have video, audio, email, text, documents, images in here. But people are moving to social media. Are you storing that in your environment? Where does it get archived off to? Can you search that information? So you're doing metadata as well. With a legal company, I put here originally content lifecycle, but the content lifecycle in a legal firm is very short. Generally, you create a document and that's it. From the point of view that you can archive it off, it does go through versioning and you manage it and things like that. But most documents, if not all documents from a legal point of view, are kept. The versions are kept. So it's not a traditional life cycle where people may declare it as a record or publish it. It's more than that. So who here thinks they know how much data they've got in their environment? Nobody? At all. One person. How much do you think you've got?
I've got about 4 terabytes.
And is that based on your database size?
Well, we did an exercise of trying to go through file shares and
Right. Okay.
That was a little while ago, so it's worth it.
Right. So there's also the point of view that you've got to track it as well, see how much it's grown over time. It's quite a complex thing to work out how much content you've got. As you said, you've tried to track it, you go through your file system, file stores. But from a SharePoint point of view, what do you do? So let's say in an environment you've got 25 gigabytes worth of data. This is based on SharePoint 2007 by a company called NetApp. They created a spreadsheet to try and work out how much content you would actually, or storage space you would actually have in need. So any guesses of how much space you need to store 25 gigabytes worth of content, roughly? Who here thinks 50 gig? Yeah? Any higher than 50? Pardon? I don't think it did in this instance, no. So no, just raw data, yeah. Any advances? 50, 60, 70? Okay. They estimate 147 gigabytes. So if you've got raw 25 gigabytes worth of data, based on these figures, they estimate 147. Now, I think that's quite conservative, especially if you go to 2010 and look at audit logs and managing in a legal firm when you have to keep all your logs, the audit logs, the IS logs, US logs in some cases as well. So just when you think about migrating to SharePoint 2013, you've got to think about how much space you actually do need. Somebody was saying in the previous session that when you do the upgrade of the actual databases, you need 3 times as much space. So storage guys aren't going to be too happy with you, and also the cost of that, although storage is relatively cheap, still be quite expensive. So management is a pain. I'm not talking about just your manager, but management of the environment as well. So there's migration challenges. Some organisations I've worked for don't always think about how they migrate the content or what the plan is for migrating that content. They often have it as a separate project. So you have the SharePoint farm, people who look after the SharePoint farm, build the farm, they've told it's 100 gig, they build it, and that's it. They don't think about when the data is going to be migrated, what time of day it's going to be migrated. If they're doing gigabytes worth of information, what impact does that have on the network, on the databases? If you've pre-grown your databases, that's great. But if you left them as the default of 1 megabyte, then you're going to have trouble. You're going to see performance impact on your databases. Managing multi-terabyte farms is also difficult. So go back to SharePoint 2007, the recommended size roughly for a database was 100 gigabytes. 2010, 200. With 2013, supports up to 4 terabytes database. However, what happens when you're in a DR situation, or if you just want to back up and restore a database to take it into development or test? How long is that going to take? Working with a client about a year ago, asked the guys, I want a database, moved over to dev. Took them about 16 hours to get it over there. 1, because they were copying it the wrong way, and 2, because it was about 600 gigabytes. how do you manage 100,000 site collections? So who here has that many site collections? Nobody. Who has about 1,000? About 1,000, 10, 5, 10,000? Anybody higher than 20? So no. So managing 100,000 site collections is a struggle. Everything you do takes time. If you wanted to write a query or say PowerShell to say get out the site ID for document IDs, it all takes time. If you want to get information about a list, say you've got a custom list in every single site collection, it takes time. That has impact on the resources of the environment as well. If on a shared virtual platform, you could be impacting other systems, so it has to be considered as well. You've got to think about managing those multiple farms. If you've got a multiple terabyte production farm, your other farms should be multiple terabytes at some stage as well, because of course you're going to be load testing, testing your applications as well. SQL Server. Who here uses SQL Server in a clustered environment? Okay. Do you use instances? Yep. So are you using SQL and Fast? Or, sorry, SharePoint and Fast? Right, okay. So do you do separate instances for each? And what about separate farms? Just separate instances?
No, it's not separate farms, it's just instances.
Separate instances. Okay. So this is one of the things with SharePoint and Fast. If you're indexing a lot of information, say 3 terabytes like Clifford Chance are, then you may struggle in the environment. You've got to think about, if you've got SharePoint and Fast, do you do separate instances? Do you separate SQL clustered environments? Think about the storage that's on as well. Do you use the same SAN? Do you have separate SANs? If you've got multiple instances, that's a good way of going, but you've got to think about, does some of your data have to be encrypted? If that's the case, you will want to do separate instances, but then there's the impact on the whole environment as well. How much RAM have you got? Have you capped the RAM per SQL instance? Think about the limited number of content databases you have as well. Anybody here have more than 10 content databases? Yeah, 50? 42, yeah. Okay, so you're not near the limit, and you're much far from it, but you also think about growth as well. So clients I've worked with have had about 75 content databases, and it's a struggle to manage. There's reports we run to say, how much space they're using, how much data space is free in the databases as well. But along with that, you've got to think about the number of site collections you have per content database. There is a limit. So a safe limit I like to keep to for SharePoint 2010 is about 2,000 site collections per content database. Now that may mean you have a content database which is 10 gigabytes, or it may mean you have a content database of 200 gigabytes. You have to go do that balance. So if you reach your 200 gigabytes, say, soft limit, you have to stop that database having any more new site collections within it. Quotas. So we spoke about storage. Who here uses quotas? So just a few. Okay, that's interesting. If you've defined your quotas, that's great. What happens when your CEO says the quotas for my site is no good? I don't want 100 meg. I can go off and Dropbox and get a few gigs. Give me more space. Well, okay, you redefine the quota or create a quota. Or if you redefine the quota, you've still got to apply that quota. By default, if you change a quota, it doesn't get reapplied to all those site collections automatically. So a bit of PowerShell here. So if you were to have to reapply a quota, this is one way of doing it. Okay, audit data. Who here has audit data enabled? Do you know what you have enabled?
Views, documents.
Right.
Just the basic things.
So just the basic. So
Also for tracking on farm level as well.
right. Okay. So obviously it's per site collection. So you turn on auditing, mostly the basics. So you're possibly storing a fair amount of content depending on how frequently your environment is being accessed. Do you have an estimate of how much data your audit information has been using? No, okay. So it might surprise some of you to learn that it's possible that only 10% of your content your 10% of the total size is your content. Depending on, again, what you've got stored in SharePoint, how often it's being accessed, what type of site it is. Now, this is unusual, but this was an example from a database which was about 600 gig in size. So we're talking about 60 gigabytes worth of data, and the rest was all audit data. Okay. So when you're estimating how much information you're going to put into SharePoint, you've got to think about, in the future, when that's being accessed, how much more space are you going to actually need? So some information, I think it was from Accelerator, they were estimating that per view you can rack up about 64 kilobytes worth of data or metadata, audit data about information. So that's about 62 megabytes per day. So it's a lot of information, a lot of data there that you could possibly be using. So to turn on the audit settings, if you are looking to turn those on, you can do this. Obviously, you might want to iterate it through your whole environment, so I might have to change that script slightly. If you want solutions around managing audit data, there's tools out there like Accelerator. WebTrends, I don't think does audit data, but has related information about IS logs and so on. Logbinder does some, and there's others as well. Obviously, this is all going to be in the video, so you can get this other information, but these are just some other solutions as well for managing audit data. One of those solutions I mentioned was Accelerator Control Point. Now, one of the features for this is they can basically apply policies across their environment. So the client I've previously worked for was using this to enforce auditing across the whole environment. Again, they were dealing with legal documents. They had to ensure that if anybody had site collection permissions, they could, if they did change, then these settings they defined were reapplied. So in Excel, you create a policy, for example, audit settings here. You can then say what policies you want to include in those, audit settings to include, and then set up the policy, configure it, and then off it goes on a scheduled basis, once a week, once a day, whatever you want. So we've spoken about audit data. Let's talk a bit about governance now. So who here's got a governance plan? A few people, not too many. Was it specifically for SharePoint? So, okay, so how does your governance plan differ to what you were doing before? How old is your governance plan? Is it a year, 2 years, 5? Pardon? 3 years old. So it's mostly quite mature, possibly. Many people don't have a governance plan, and I personally don't like all the buzz around governance. It's stuff we should all be doing. It's like similar to ITIL. It's all to do with policies and procedures and roles. So yes, hyping up governance is good because people understand it a bit better. They know they need to do it. But in actual fact, we should all be doing it anyway. It doesn't matter if it's SharePoint or just SQL or CRM or anything like that. Everything needs a governance plan around it. Going to look at a few new features that may be useful in 2013. So there's EDiscovery, which is in Office 365 as well, which not so much for legal firms, but for those organisations who may have to put a hold on certain documents or discover if somebody's possibly shared information with organisations they shouldn't be to see what's happening. Information rights management isn't necessarily new, but it is enhanced in 2013. We'll look at some of that later. Social is new. Anybody using SharePoint 2013 social features? Okay, so just one, quite a small number of people. Have you looked at the legal aspects of that as well?
Still trialing that out, to be honest, right now.
Right.
So that's I've started on.
Right. So a lot of legal organisations are very nervous about social and generally HR in general. It's like, what's the policy around it? Is it actually social? Is it just another way of communicating in the business? I mean, if you're on a link and you send a message to somebody, all that is a short email. So should it be treated significantly different to any other medium of sharing information? Shredded data, a cool new feature in 2013. So does everybody know what shredded data is here? So a few. So basically what this is if you take a Word document and say it's got 10 pages, you save it to SharePoint, and then you update that, add another few pages, SharePoint will only save the changes of that document. It will only change the deltas, the differences between the document. So potentially if you've got what originally was a 10 meg document and you've made, say, 9 changes to it, the incremental change may only be a few kilobytes or 100 kilobytes or so, saving a significant amount of space. How that works with NetApp and deduplicating, I'm not sure. It all depends on what content you've got in your environment. If you're like a template-based organisation, or if you're more ad hoc and your documents change quite significantly. Site mailboxes, also new, so being able to create a mailbox for a specific site in SharePoint. Let's look at that in a minute. And also data loss prevention. So this is things like, come to this here, where you can have policies in place. So if you send an email, it will detect if there's say a Visa credit card number or somebody's date of birth or anything like this. And these are customizable, so you can change these around as well to suit your needs. Archiving now is also, especially with Office 365, is across the platform. And if you've got Exchange 2013, SharePoint 2013, and Link as well, you can archive data off if need be. So just going back to site mailboxes, as I said before, it's about keeping email close to the site collection. And the reason why you might want to do that, especially in the legal world, if you've got, say, a matter site and it's a specific topic, then it's kind of like a project, so which means that you may have set up an email address for a project anyway. So it's quite good to do this through SharePoint, linking with Exchange, and just allow people to send emails about that project and just CC the mailbox of the site. One thing to note, mailboxes are special users. They're not licensed within Office 365, but they do come up as a user in Office 365. There's not a license required. So I'm just going to try and get to a demo. Excuse the resolution of this. So this is Office 365, and let's sit down for this. So anybody here using Office 365? A few people. Anybody using it for legal documents? No, it's good. So this is the admin section. And if I can, actually what I'll show you is, so this is an intranet site I've created previously. It's just a root site collection of the environment, and I've really created a mailbox here. So this will look just like Office web apps with Outlook. And what we can do is we see, you can see here that when you create the site, it creates a custom email address for it. So what we can do, and try and do, is just email. So when I file off this email, is there any questions?
Could not view that as a, well, just think about legal users might be having a matter site. What's the emails on that?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if Matt knows. Matt, can you use Office 365 and have a Webpart to view this information within just the site itself, rather than having to go off to it? No?
Not the Outlook one.
Yeah. No, doesn't seem like it. I mean, going back to, I think it was SharePoint 2001, 2003, they had a Webpart where you could have them on the My site and have email brought in. But there's functionality which was quite useful years ago, which they've just removed for various unknown reasons. So what I'm doing here, can't see it, let me just bring it over, is going to send an email to this site mailbox, and what we should see is should appear shortly. Yeah.
With SharePoint 13, with search being built into the platform, you still think that the databases for search should be on a separate instance?
If you can afford it, yeah. And possibly a separate SQL cluster as well, if you can afford it.
Is that based just on performance or search? Good performance or?
Performance, resilience. Although if you split up your environment, it's going to make it more complicated. It also means that your single point of failure is less. So if you've got fast databases and your SharePoint database is all on one cluster and one instance, then you're going to have storage issues depending on how you structure your storage. You're going to have contention issues with accessing the environment. I mean, to be honest, I've seen a 3 terabyte farm on SharePoint 2010 using fast, indexing incrementally every 10 minutes, and performance is fine. But it just depends how you want to manage the whole environment and how resilient you want to be, really. Okay, so you can see here the emails come through. Quite simple. So you can obviously have attachments and other things on there as well. So it's just kind of a way to bring email into SharePoint, if you like. It's not really sitting in SharePoint, but it makes it easier for users to relate documents with, say, a specific site collection to emails about that topic.
If someone sent you an attachment, will it give you the option to save it direct to the site?
Not that I've seen. I did have a go at that earlier on, but all I was getting was, I've got an attachment there, let's do it quickly. I think the only option you get is to save as, and it will say, well, where do you want to save it to? No, there doesn't seem any additional functionality to get that back into the site itself. So you just have to go back to the intranet. So you must, unfortunately, have to save as to desktop and then re-upload it. There's actually a way you could do it. I can't think off the top of my head. I know, obviously, you can have mail-enabled document libraries. Matt, that's on the face, right? Okay. Pardon? You can drag documents, but from web client to web client doesn't always seem to work. So if you do desktop to like a document, seems to be
Explorer view work anymore?
Yeah, still Explorer View should still work. But if you're sending, I think the point was if you were sending an attachment in an email and you were going to a site mailbox, then how do you get that document back into the site that mailbox is related to? You could argue that it's going to happen, so somebody's going to have a need for it, but hopefully people would have created the document in the right site in the first place. But it's not a perfect world. No. Okay, so one thing you can also do is talk about records management, so and holds. And because this is Office 365, there's timer jobs that aren't as configurable as I would like, so I'm not sure if this is going to show up. So to create a hold, it's quite a simple process. Give a simple name. Now, the other problem with Office 365 here is this all has licensing implications. So if you're on E2, you kind of get practically everything, which this is on, but you don't get all the necessary you need to do this properly. So you need an additional license, an additional cost, which is something like £2.50 per month per user. So it's, it's quite an interesting proposition from Microsoft. I don't think it's quite there yet. I think they need to make it cheaper, considering it's not something you're going to use day in, day out. It may be, I say it's per month. For the E3 license I've got, it was a per annum subscription. So, and I don't know what happens if you then downgrade and upgrade, what happens to the content or data. So you specify a mailbox. You see here, down here, it talks about the premium features required. No filters. So what this is basically doing is going off and creating a hold on the my mailbox and all the data in it. So this. Yeah, so this wasn't working yesterday, it's still not working today. What should happen is, you should be given a list of how many items it is, how big as well, and then the ability to download it. Unfortunately, the demo gods are not with us, and it's failed. So if this was working, you can download it as a PST file, and then archive it off anywhere you want if you need be, or send it to a legal organisation, then you just check it. Okay, I'm going to talk about the cloud. Now, some organisations and Microsoft are trying to push everybody to the cloud now. The problem with the cloud is people aren't using it in the right way. It's estimated that 18% of people use it without the permission. Now, I think that's quite low. I think that's much nearer 50% of people use it. And the problem with that is it's not regulated. It's not necessarily encrypted either. People may be able to get access to it, and they shouldn't be able to access to it. But it does offer some benefits. Generally fixed costs. It's easier to manage those costs per person. It's relatively cost effective, depending on your requirements. It's secure to a point. You can always have more encryption internally than you can have on the cloud. Microsoft mostly will support, 256-bit encryption or something like that. If you wanted more, then an internal solution is mostly the best way to go. I don't think it's ready now for most legal departments. Also, with cloud solutions, you generally find that they're hosted in 1 or 2 countries, and then if you've got certain documents that shouldn't be stored in those countries, then the solution is practically worthless. So what does the future hold for SharePoint and legal sector? Well, it's not quite there yet, especially with Office 365. I think SharePoint 2013 is a big step. I think you really need to use third-party tools such as those from Sword, Accelerator, Harmony, and some of the other vendors who are here at the conference to really make it suitable. The previous slide we saw with the custom file dialog box, WorkShare or SharePoint have a tool which does something similar. This is similar to Harmony as well, who have a tool to integrate with SharePoint, see data from other parts of the environment in your environment. And then this is their version, if you like, or that came beforehand of that dialog tool, where you can access your matters. Look at your checked out documents. You have favourites as well, and they have this search as well in the top right there. So you are really the judge of whether or not the environment is suitable for you. SharePoint 2013, as I said, is a big step. You need to make sure that it meets your requirements. Custom solutions, preferably off the shelf, I find are better than those developed in-house. In-house ones, you tend to find that long ongoing costs of those are quite heavy compared to buying a product. Some people think it's the other way around, but in my experience is you buy a tool off the shelf, you get what you're given, you know what it's going to do, and you know that generally other people have bought it as well, and it's supported by the vendor. So that's it from me. You may be interested in some of these other presentations which are later today, which are related to this topic. Do you have any questions? No? That's it. It's great. Thanks a lot, guys.